Well, hello, my lovely lilies. I hope everyone is having a safe and happy Thanksgiving. I have for you today Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark Part 1. I'm hoping in the future I'll be able to do more of these. So please, comment below and tell me which stories you would like me to do next. Without further ado, close the blinds, dim those lights, cuddle under your favorite blanket, and let's begin. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Harold. When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to the cool, green pastures in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months. Then they brought them back down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but oh, was it boring. All day the 2 men tended to their cows. At night they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of a man," he said. "It would be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of old sacks stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose, like Harold's, and tiny eyes like his as well. Then they added dark hair and a twisted frown. Of course, they also gave it Harold's name. Each morning on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden to scare away the birds. Each night they brought him inside so he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of them might say, "How are the vegetables going today, Harold?" Then the other one, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They both would laugh, but not Harold. Whenever something went wrong, they would take it out on Harold. They would curse him, even kick him or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it all over the doll's face. "How you like the stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you better eat it, or else." Then the 2 men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas, "and that will be that." "Let's not do something stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then the doll grunted, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside Harold, and they were making that sound. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they would put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him as badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold's growing," he said. I was thinking the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our imagination. Alfred replied. "We have been up here in the mountains too long." The next morning while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night long he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in the far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid. They decided to take the cows down into the valley that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt they had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. "There really ain't nothing to be afraid of," they told one another. "After all, what could a doll do?" They drew straws to see which one would go back. Unfortunately, it was Thomas. "I'll catch up with you later," he said, and Alfred walked on toward the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. One night a young girl was sleeping in her bed when a spider crawled across her face. It stopped for a few minutes on her left cheek, then it went on its way. When she woke the next morning and looked in the mirror, she noticed a red spot on her cheek. "What is this?" she asked her mother. It looks like a spider bite," her mother replied. "It'll go away, just don't scratch it." Soon the small red spot grew into a big red boil. "Look at it now," the girl said. "It's getting bigger." "That sometimes happens," her mother said. "It's coming to a head." In a few days the red spot was even larger. "Look at it now," the girl said. "It hurts so much, and it makes me look so ugly." "We'll have the doctor look at it," her mother said. "Maybe it's infected." But the doctor couldn't see the girl until the next day. That night she decided to take a nice, relaxing bath. As she lay soaking in the warm water, the boil suddenly burst. Out poured a swarm of tiny spiders from the eggs their mother had laid in her cheek. There was a small village in the middle of a dark forest. In the village there was a haunted house that everyone was terrified to enter. Nobody would dare stay there overnight. Legend had it that every night at midnight, a bloody, severed head fell down the chimney. One day a rich man was passing through the village. After hearing about the haunted house, he offered $1,000 to whoever was brave enough to spend an entire night inside. None of the villagers would take him up on his bet, until a young boy stepped forward and raised his hand. The boy announced that he would spend the night in the haunted house, as long as he could bring his dog with him. The man agreed, and it was settled. The next evening the boy set off for the haunted house, with his trusty dog following close behind. As he entered the dreary abode, he whistled a happy tune to calm his nerves. After doing a little exploring, he decided to make himself comfortable in the living room. He started a fire in the fireplace, then he lay down on the couch with his dog and waited for morning to arrive. For a while nothing happened. Then, a little after midnight, he thought he heard a strange noise over the crackling of the fire and the creaking of the house. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere out in the woods. Someone or something was singing a haunted melody. Sang the eerie voice. The boy stared out the window and his hair stood on end. Maybe it's just somebody taking a shortcut through the woods, he told himself. Then his dog suddenly perked up and sang. Linji, Kinji, Molly, Collie, Dingo, Dingo. The boy could hardly believe his ears. His dog had never uttered a word before. Now it was answering the haunted voice in the woods. He pinched himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. A few moments later, the boy heard the voice singing again. Only this time it was closer and louder. Sang the mysterious voice. The dog answered again. Linji, Kinji, Molly, Collie, Dingo, Dingo. This really had the boy scared. He was afraid that whoever was lurking in the woods would hear the dog singing and come to get them. A few moments later, the boy heard the voice singing again. Now it was in the backyard. It cried. The dog sang back louder. Linji, Kinji, Molly, Collie, Dingo, Dingo. A few moments later, the boy heard the voice singing again. Now it was coming down the chimney. It yelled. Again the dog sang back. Linji, Kinji, Molly, Collie, Dingo, Dingo. Suddenly a bloody severed head fell down the chimney. It missed the fire and landed right in front of the dog. The dog took one look at it and fell over dead from fright. Then the head turned and stared at the boy. It slowly opened its mouth and screamed. The next morning, the rich man went to check on the boy. He found him lying on the floor of the haunted house. His hair had turned white, and he couldn't stop screaming. Alright, my lovely lilies, thank you so much for watching the new video. If you can, hit that subscribe and like button, comment below and tell me your thoughts. Also, don't forget to tap the little notification bell so you're always in the know on this channel. As well, guys, you can always find me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and always you can hit me up in my emails. Feel free to send me your stories, whether they're fiction or totally true. I'm always up for some great stories. And oh, by the way, until next time, sweet dreams.